Sorry, I was muted. Ah! Do you know I'm not having a good day? Sorry. I'll start that again. Actually, I'm not going to start again. I was just saying. So yes, we're gonna focus mostly on Suella Braverman. What's been going on? Obviously, a lot of today. It's like, is it what she expected or not? You know, if you were paying attention to what Suella Braverman had been suggesting, you would imagine that, well, one, there would be some disruption at the cenotaph, which there was, and it would be caused by the pro-Palestinian march. Well, it was not. So Mark Rowley, who is the Met Police Commissioner, said that the scheduled march took place fine. There was no great policing incidents there. Anyone who's paid close attention will know that there were pockets of problems there. There was indeed some violence as well. Now, I don't want to downplay that. Violence is violence, and the people involved are on camera and should be arrested. Right. But the march itself took place peacefully, and it took place miles. Should we see where it took place? It took place miles away from the cenotaph. Where are we? Here we go. There it is. Look. And the other thing, notice the time as well. So, obviously on Armistice Day, we have a 2-minute silence at 11 a.m. Okay, most of us observed that. So the march began at 12:45, so sometime after it, all right? And it started to, miles to the northwest, a couple of miles to the northwest, 2.5 miles maybe. But there was disruption at 11 a.m. People at the cenotaph for the armistice silence noted that the Tommy Robinson Brigade, the groups that Suella Braverman basically invited to London, were so disruptive, so noisy, they broke through police cordons, that the people who were holding their moment of silence were disrupted. So they actually did disrupt that, and we've had until now, not a word of condemnation from the government. So this took place, and we've had clashes for hours afterwards, but we actually had disruption this morning. Now, let's have a look at what Rishi Sunak has just said. No, that's the wrong one. Oh, here it is. So, this is Rishi Sunak, who could only be bothered to cobble this together this evening. He says, I condemn the violent, wholly unacceptable scenes we have seen today from the EDL and associated groups, in other words, Suella Braverman's brigade, and the fash clash, as I'm calling it. I'm coining that phrase. I hope no one else has already come up with it. And Hamas sympathisers attending the National March for Palestine. The despicable actions of a minority of people undermine those who have chosen to express their views peacefully. Now, here's the thing. First of all, lumping those two together. He's fine, by the way, to release statements condemning both of the things. But where he lumps them together in the same paragraph and he says a minority of people. Well, here's the thing. A minority, and a small minority, noticeable, but a small minority of the people at the Palestine March need to be condemned for what they were chanting and what they were displaying. But when it comes to the protest at the cenotaph, 100% of those people protesting, that's not a minority. That was that entire assembly. Not everyone at the cenotaph, but not everyone at the cenotaph was protesting, yeah? All of the protesters at the cenotaph are the ones that are supposed to be condemned here. Then it says Remembrance Weekend. I'm sick of that. There's no such thing as Remembrance Weekend. It comes around like every 6 to 8 years. Next year, Armistice Day will be on Monday. So where's the weekend? What do we do on the Saturday? Anyway, Remembrance Weekend, misnomer, is a time for us to come together as a nation, remember those who fought and died for our freedoms. No, untrue. Remembrance Sunday, you can have a little bit of that. But on Armistice Day, we remember, it's purely, again, this change, they died for our freedom. No. The Armistice Day commemorates the guns falling silent in 1918. That wasn't a war to defend our freedoms. It was just a war, right? It was a war that spilled out across large parts of the world. It was just death. What we do is we remember people who gave their lives because politicians we're drinking too heavily, really. That's what we're doing. But anyway, what we've seen today does not defend the honour of our armed forces, but utterly disrespects them. Okay, I agree with that. This is true for EDL thugs attacking police officers, so at least he's mentioned that. And trespassing on the cenotaph, again, at least he's mentioning that. And it is true for those singing anti-Semitic chants and brandishing pro-Hamas signs and clothing on today's protest. Okay, fine. Again, should be two separate statements, but that's fine. The fear and intimidation of the Jewish community have experienced over the weekend is deplorable. That is also true. There has been a great deal of intimidation. All criminality must be met with full and swift force of the law. That is what I told the Met Police Commissioner on Wednesday. No, it is not. What he told the Met Police Commissioner on Wednesday was to cancel the march today. And he didn't get that. So that's untrue. It says, this is what they're accountable for and is what I expect. Okay. I will be meeting the Met Police Commissioner in the coming days. Why? Why? Why is the Prime Minister meeting with the Met Police Commissioner? Isn't that the Home Secretary's job? Why is Rishi Sunak saying that? But anyway. So I'll go through some comments before we move on to the next bit. Should Sunak demote Braverman to Leader of the Commons or similar, should be bound by cabinet responsibility, so can't rebel, but would no longer have the platform to spew about. Well, he doesn't actually have the power to do that. He has the power to stop her having a government position. He doesn't have the power to compel her to take one she doesn't want. So, yeah, he can stop her being Home Secretary and, of course, should. I tell you what, my response to Rishi Sunak's statement, the one I've just read out, was he has just attacked the violence and trespass, as he calls it, that his Home Secretary incited earlier this week. So why is she still his Home Secretary? Someone was asking me on Twitter just now, like, if Sunak doesn't get rid of her before Wednesday, does this make it easy for the opposition in PMQs? And it's like, it's going to be easy anyway. Sunak could sack her given that he's probably not going to sack her today. I probably ought to keep the news feed open just in case, but I suspect he's not going to sack her today. Even if he sacks her on like Wednesday morning, Starmer can you can imagine a situation where Starmer's got his questions ready because she hasn't been sacked, and then he sacks her like 5 minutes before. He could still ask the same questions. Because look at the situation, right? Let's just recap, although I've done videos on this, so I don't want to spend too long on it. So, first of all, Suella Braverman incites. It's incitement to riot, basically. She's incited this violence. She called for people to do it. She should be arrested. She should be charged, along with this full force of the law, along with everyone that ends up in court after, like, breaking through police lines and trespassing on the cenotaph and shouting out while the 2-minute silence is going on. Anyone that's arrested for that, Braverman should be charged with the incitement of that. But anyway, the point was that she submitted it to Downing Street and they said, right, you've got a load of changes to make here, my dear. And she didn't make them. So she defied Downing Street and lied because she said she had Downing Street's clearance for that article, but she didn't. So she lied about that and defied Sunak. So Sunak looks weak by keeping her, even if he gets rid of her later on. The fact that he didn't immediately sack her. Because look what happened. Let's take a similar situation. When Boris Johnson lied to Michael Howard, so a story ran that Boris Johnson had had some affair or other. Of course it did. It's on Boris Johnson. And Michael Howard, who was at the time Conservative Party leader, asked him about it. And Boris Johnson said it was untrue. Then when it turned out it was true, Michael Howard sacked him because Boris Johnson had lied to the Tory leader. So your authority would be shot if you just let it go. So Michael Howard sacked Boris Johnson for lying to him. Well, Suella Braverman has defied Rishi Sunak and he's not sacked her. So straight away, it doesn't matter what happens now. Starmer can push at that. And the thing is, Sunak must be mad. There are two lines that Labour regularly use against Sunak that really work with the public. One, being out of touch. Two, being weak. This is weak. So now, today, Suella Braverman is saying, oh, these so-called, these hate marches you're going to do, they're going to disrupt the Armistice Day celebrations. Well, celebrations, I mean, you know, whatever you want to call them. And commemorations, reflections, shall we say. And that didn't happen. Didn't happen. But those commemorations were disrupted by people that she sort of dog whistled to. So, again, not sacking her tonight means that the Tories are cool with that. Because we haven't seen, where's all the Tory MPs attacking it? There might be the odd backbencher who's written a Twitter statement, but where's the government? I mean, we've now had Rishi Sunak at least attack that. It took many, many hours for him to do so. Where's the rest of the government lining up to attack it? Where's the Tory party drawing a line here? She should be gone for that. Well, Angry Pagan saying, do I think Stam will utilise this in the coming PMQs, and if he does, how? Yeah, exactly as I've just said, though, here. He knows full well, whenever Labour have the chance to paint Sunak as out of touch or weak, they will surely use it. And this shows him to be weak. Suella Braverman is basically, she's dangling Rishi Sunak on a string, like a puppet, right? Sunak is not getting a grip at all of the situation. He's really not getting a grip. Absolutely mad. I mean, look at this. Let's get this here. Look at this. All these people breaking through those police ranks. Now, being clear, some of these people would have turned up anyway. They turned up last year. They were just going to turn up anyway. And if there's a chance to cause trouble, they will do, right? But because they were given the green light to do so by the Home Secretary, some of them were even citing her when the journalists were asking them what they were there for, some of them cited Suella Braverman as the reason they were there. Well, the Home Secretary called us to action, you see, to defend the cenotaph, right? Defend it from whom? The only people that attacked it are these idiots. John said, did I know there's a Lee Anderson Appreciation Society online? I think you should donate bananas to show appreciation. I think he likes baked beans, doesn't he? Should have some beans. I didn't know. No, that's quite grim. I hope it's entirely a parody. But anyway, says the film of Robinson and the outright shouting slogans and pushing the police like football thugs absolutely disrespected the senator. Disrespected everything to do with it. It's like, you know, the march that they were moaning about took place a good hour and a half after. Didn't even begin until an hour and a half afterwards, and it was nowhere near it. If you put it this way, if the news hadn't mentioned the Palestinian march today, you know, like they didn't mention the Rejoin march, you know, a couple of months ago. If they didn't mention it, no one would know it was going on. Unless, of course, you were down the route, which very few people would be. If you were at the cenotaph itself, you would never have known it was happening. There was no visible or audio signs of the Palestinian march at the cenotaph. You couldn't possibly hear or see it. You know, again, if I put the route up, how could you see that? The closest point of contact's like 2 miles away, nearly. 1.5 miles maybe, and that's as the crow flies. You won't be able to see it. Absolutely mad. Sacking Braverman, suspending the whip could be more dangerous. Should be make herself a martyr, become the figurehead for the far right. I mean, you know, let her go and do what. I mean, what's she going to do? She's got 2 role models. She can either do what Tommy Robinson does and keep finding herself sentenced to prison, right? Okay, let's see that. I think she might lose her KC status then. Or she can do what Nigel Farage does. He's a little bit more circumspect. You know, he doesn't go around behaving like a thug. He's a bit more nuanced. And she can just go on GB News. That's fine. That's cool. I don't mind that. That's better than her being in politics, you know. So that's what she can do. So no, I don't buy this should be a martyr thing. I would 100% sack her, and I would 100% tell her and any of her supporters, because apparently there's news that if Braverman sacks, there's 2 ministers will resign. I don't know who they are, so I don't know how senior they are. 2 ministers resign. If I was Rishi Sunak, I would say, no problem. I'd let it be known. I'd say, if you need to resign, that's fine. I've got plenty of MPs to replace you with. But if anyone further inflames tensions, I will remove the party whip. So then Suella Braverman, if she goes off on one in her resignation letter or at all as a backbencher, she loses the Tory whip, deselected. She's not going to be a candidate. And I will say the same to any supporters. If you try and inflame tensions, I am going to remove the party whip and you will not be a candidate in the next election. That is the power he has and he's not using it. I mean, remember, Boris Johnson, when he didn't even have a majority, he had just about enough MPs in Parliament to sustain his leadership. That was it. And he still sacked, he just basically got rid of 20 MPs, which meant that he no longer had even confidence of the House, really. Sonak could get rid of like 20 and 25 even, and still have, a majority, a clear majority. So Sunak's got it, and he wouldn't have to do it for 25. Honestly, hardly any MPs would be up for losing the party whip over this. Hardly any of them. They will almost, there's a couple of nutters maybe. Even Braverman would fall into line. I'm telling you, Braverman's ambitions are all toast if Sunak says, right, you're not going to be the candidate at the next election. She's absolutely toast. And I cannot, for the life of me, work out why Sunak cannot do that. Oh, Yaxley Lennon, that'll be old Tommy Robinson there. Cleared off in a taxi covered in gay pride colours. Yeah, I saw that. It was good, that. Because that's the thing. That's what he does, you see. Stirs it all up. He's there for the photos, right? There for the photos. I was there. As soon as that's done, he's off and he leaves his mob to it. He's not in any of these pictures. Where is it? He's not there. He's not doing that. He's not pushing through the police there. He goes there, swears a bit, gets a few photos taken, off on his toes, leaves the rest of them. Most MPs would forget about Cruella in less than a month and no friends in Parliament. I mean, I don't know how many real supporters she's got in Parliament. She's obviously got a few. But I would suggest, when you look at the ones who keep jumping to her defence, it's people like Lee Anderson and Jonathan Gullis, and you just think, these are the ones who are losing their seats in the next election. They're not useful to her. They're not useful. And if she's appealing to people who are, first of all, not swing voters. So if she did become Tory leader, it's not going to help her win an election. And within her party, it's the same sort. They're the ones who they're the lunatics who were just picked as candidates in seats that the Tories normally have no chance of winning and happened to win because the stars aligned last time. So they're straight out again. Is there any intelligence suggesting Braverman has dirt on Sunak such that it wouldn't fire her? No, I would completely dismiss that. First of all, we know what Sunak's up to. He's not very good at concealing the skeletons in his closet. We know what he's up to. Second of all, it's purely about... there's two possibilities, and I suspect it's a combination of the two. First of all, he's worried that she could destabilise his leadership. Second of all, there is a possibility that the reason he was happy for her to be Home Secretary in the first place is so that she could appeal to the Gammons, because he is interested in the Gammon vote. Like, the Tories are worried about losing votes to Reform UK. So there was a sort of logic in having someone like Suella Braverman in place for them. It's just that it's costing them too much because they're losing more votes in the centre than they're securing on the right. So, there's no point. So really, the major danger to Sunak, the reason why, he may or may not sack her, but the reason why he's not really sacking her is the fear that she has enough supporters to put letters in, and on top of the 2025 that are already in, maybe trigger a confidence vote, which wouldn't bring him down directly, but would fatally weaken his leadership. Removing whip from a few Tories makes no difference. Sunak, what does he need a majority for? Anyone doesn't have any policy to vote on. Well, that's another good point, isn't it? I mean, there isn't in theory, if he lost if he actually lost his majority, there could be a parliamentary vote of confidence in him, which could bring him down. Realistically, that won't happen, just like it didn't happen with Boris Johnson, although at the time it should have done. There were different reasons for that. So, yeah, Sunak's position is not seriously under threat. It's just that if he faces a confidence vote such that he doesn't get a majority, never mind majority of Tory MPs, he needs a majority of MPs, which he won't get. So then Labour will label him as running a minority government, because the Tories now, pretty much the only thing they've got is this, well, you know, we've got a stable majority. If he has to face a confidence vote that exposes the fact that actually he hasn't, then it's game over. Absolutely game over. Do I reckon the next election is the end for the Tories? Not the final end, no. They'll always be there. The money will be there for them. They'll come back. That's what worries me. They'll come back, and they will have learnt that I just think when they come back, they will pick up where they left off. That's what I worry about. I think the way I would imagine it, assuming nothing changes, now I hope Labour make quite a lot of like constitutional changes, right? But assuming they don't, here's how I would see it. I would think, first of all, the Tories will try and go down the explicitly far-right route. So they'll pick someone like Braverman. Doesn't matter who they pick, though. It'll be the same direction for the party. It'll fail. It better bloody fail. So it'll fail. They'll eventually start to realise that they have to focus on winning the centre back. So they'll do that. They'll start to coalesce around some credible figures around the centre, start to make them somewhat more electable. By this time, Labour will be doing the opposite. Labour will have been in power and they'll look comfortable, just like the last time. And then people in Labour will start to say, okay, so we can start to ignore the Overton window now. We can start to like shift too far to the left because we're winning now and the Tories are in disarray. And you'll end up with it flipping the other way, and Labour will start to move away from the centre. The Tories will move back towards the centre. The Tories will come back in. But all of that, but that won't mean you end up with a moderate Tory party in Parliament. It'll just look like it. What you'll actually have is all these same people who are calling for us to leave the European Court of Human Rights, what they mean is the Council of Europe. They'll still be there and they'll still be in positions of influence. They'll just be in stasis. So that's how I would see it going, which is why, you know, things like electoral reform are incredibly urgent. You know, I really do think it is. Because a lot of what the Tories are pushing at the moment with their culture wars, it's not working. But largely why it's not working is because they're in power. So it doesn't work. You can't like complain about the establishment. You're effectively, when you culture, the idea of culture wars is you're attacking the establishment for like not protecting the fabric of society. That's in essence what a culture war is. But they are the establishment. They're in government. So, but their rhetoric starts to work more effectively in opposition. So although their culture wars are failing now, they may not in opposition. If the Tories come back to power, will this extreme ideology persist or fester? Yes, absolutely it will, and get worse if they do the finish. Because the way I liken it, I said in a video today, the way I liken it, if you think back to the mid-90s, there were various Brexit groups forming. The referendum party was the first, like, of the big forerunners. Say big, you know, it was a lot of money behind it, so it had a lot of publicity. It was Goldsmith, that I think, wasn't it? And what happened is when the Tories were kicked out, they were in disarray and it all looked like, you know, but what was happening is you were getting the likes of UKIP growing, becoming more organised. You know, you had various people starting to organise, starting to get serious. When it looked like the Tories were ready for coming back to power, they started to actively infiltrate the Conservative Party. George Eustace, for example, who became the Secretary of State for DEFRA, he was UKIP. He was one of the UKIP infiltrators. That's what they did. They started to infiltrate them so that when the Tories came back to power, all of a sudden there were a lot, although they weren't in positions of leadership within the party, they were very much there. They were in the party, they were not just in the party, but in the parliamentary party. So that infiltration began, and it ramped up as well. So from 2015, you know, the Tory party, the parliamentary party, had an awful lot of basically UKIPers in it. And now it's gone really far. It's pretty much like having the National Front in there. You know, Rishi Sunak attacks the EDL. Well, there's a load of EDL on his own backbenchers. In fact, some in government positions. And those people are there now, so they don't have to do the infiltration next time. The infiltration's already happened. There's no attempt to get rid of them. None at all. So they're already in place. So all they have to do is work on their electability. They just have to, they will initially try to retain control of the leadership of the party. That's what I think they will do. They will initially try to retain control of the leadership. If it works for them, fantastic. If it doesn't, then they'll relinquish control, but they will still hold the real power. At the end of the day, because Parliament is really sovereign over the government, as long as they've got plenty of their members in the parliamentary party, it doesn't matter who's the leader of the party. Like we can see here, Rishi Sunak's the leader of the party, but he's not really the leader of the party, is he? And it'll be the same thing. They'll be quite happy as long as they are satisfied that one of their nutters can't actually appeal to voters. They'll go, okay, we'll get a puppet in to appeal to the voters. They'll be happy to do that, but they know that they will hold the balance of power. But anyway, as long as Sunak can pass a budget, he'll call the election until the last moment. I don't think he will. Needs as much time to asset strip the country. Yeah, there is that. But again, it's not like, you've got to think of it this way. It's not like if Rishi Sunak thinking, oh, this month I'm going to nick this money, or this month I'm going to nick this money. He's got plans. I've no doubt about that. He's got plans to feather his own nest, right? But it's not like this month I'll do this month I'll do that. So that, you know, if he gets to, say, September next year, he'll think, well, in another month I'll do this. I think he's got certain plans and it'll take as long as it does. For all we know, whatever he's planning will be done by May. And then he could call the election in May. You know, so it doesn't follow that he'll try and call it as late as possible to steal as much as possible. He will have very specific things in mind he wants to achieve. We know he wants to achieve the Indian trade deal. But again, it might be put to him that there isn't enough time. I don't know. It may be that there just isn't enough time. So he'll have to abandon. So there'll be some things he'll have to abandon. And so as soon as he's got everything done he wants to get done, that'll be it. Can PR prevent a scenario from happening? If not, and what can we do to prevent even more wanton destruction from happening ever again? PR will. If it's full PR, that will 100% stop it. You know, there's people keep saying, oh, actually, PR just allows extremists into power. No, it doesn't. It allows them into Parliament. It does not allow them into power, right? If you look at, you know, voting behaviour, and bear in mind, voting behaviour would change markedly to many more parties if we had PR. If we had PR, who are the parties who are going to gain more seats? Yes, Reform UK would actually gain some seats. But who are the parties that would be the big winners from PR? The Lib Dems and the Greens, ultimately. And although the Greens, you know, is a bit of a magnet for some extremists, as soon as they start to become a larger party, because their particular aims require them to have a good public reputation, they'll get more organised and they'll get more professional. So actually, the Green Party will actually, they'll end up with fewer of those nutters in them that you sometimes see at the local level. It'll be more Caroline Lucas type of politicians. So yeah, the idea that, I mean, first of all, the Tories have no chance of winning a majority of votes. If it's full PR, what I don't want is a hybrid scheme. You know, because people will say, well, what about Italy then? Italy doesn't have PR. It has a little bit of PR, Maloney won her power based on the first past the post stuff. There are some countries where even with PR you can get like extreme governments in, although they're usually booted out in short order. But in this country, we're not really extremists. We're actually quite a tolerant society. You wouldn't know it to look at how the media choose to present us, but we're actually a very tolerant society. Hopefully Star will enforce the Levinson recommendations. Yeah, I mean, what I would want is I want a new one, because obviously it's 10 years, over 10 years now since Levinson. I think we need an updated one. But yes, he would certainly have carte blanche to implement some of those recommendations to get the ball rolling, and then order another inquiry while he's doing it. I definitely want that. You reckon Bowler Hatman reckons January 25th, 2025? That goes to the Mac. No. Like, I don't know when it would be. I think May is most likely. It won't be January 2025. There's many reasons why. Not the least of which is, have you looked at the Conservative Party at the moment? It is actually on fire. It is on fire. There is... you can never say there's no way, because British politics has broken every rule in the past few years. But how on earth can the Conservative Party carry on for another year, let alone 13 months? 14 months even, actually, if you think about it. No, it's not going to be. And it wouldn't, like, Winter would be mad, because it's not just about Rishi Sunak. His own MPs get a bit of a say, you know. They get a say. They don't want to go. You're not, right, there's Tory MPs who are worried about winning their seats, and they're trying to work out when is the best time to go to the election to maximise their chance of winning their seat. Or it's very obvious it is not Winter. They know it can't be Winter. They're just thinking to themselves, is it better spring or autumn? That's what they're thinking. But they may have no choice in the matter. They may have absolutely no choice in the matter. The party, unless something happens, like Suella Braverman, it's reported in the news that she's sanguine. It's like, oh, if I get sacked, I get sacked. If I don't, I don't care. Well, there's others that think she actually wants to get sacked. But she's certainly behaving like a law unto herself. She is the loosest of loose cannons. And she's going to behave like that on the backbenchers or in government. Like, Sonak is... The knives are out now. You know, Boris Johnson now feels that he can attack Sunak without looking disloyal. It's all, you know, the knives are out for Sunak. I just cannot see how it can last 6 months. Countries with full PR let some loonies in, but they're much more stable over elections in terms of health and education policies. Yes, because, again, you're not going to, like... So imagine a situation where we had, like, the VIP lane during the pandemic. There will be... If you had to have a coalition, there'll be a party in that coalition will go, our voters will crucify us for this, so you're not doing it. It's really that simple. So, yeah, you know, you cannot... Whereas the way the Conservative Party works is absolute madness, because they all sort of let the leader do whatever. You know, especially when you've had a leader who's... I mean, Rishi Sunak can't. But Boris Johnson, he won an election, won a large majority. So they let him do whatever he wanted, because as far as they were concerned, he'd won an election. And because he had not spared the rod, he sacked like 20... I can't remember, it was 19 to 21, whatever it was. About 20 Tory MPs, removed the whip. Dominic Grieve and Nicholas Soames and people like that, just sacked them. And so he was seen as like tough, but also he'd given them their win. So they let him do whatever. That doesn't happen in a coalition. It's much harder to corrupt a coalition than it is, particularly a party like the Conservatives, where it's very top down, where it's like they just defer to the leader. You know, do you remember in 2010 when they were negotiating for the Lib Dem Tory coalition? And there was all this talk about Nick Clegg having to get various agreements from the different strands of executive decision-making within the Lib Dem party. The Lib Dem party's got lots of different bodies that are all involved in decision-making. And, you know, journalists were asking how the Conservatives are going to come to agreement. And William Hague famously said that David Cameron is the leader, he will decide. It's really that simple for the Conservatives. Leader decides. John said, I thought your crude psychoanalysis of Thatcher's success in recent video had a few grains of truth. Interesting, they haven't realised themselves they like a dominatrix nanny. Well, I mean, that was Thatcher herself. If you look at most of the people they revere, they tend to be men, but they're strong. It's like the strong man. You know, the likes of Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin and, you know, Viktor Orban, for example, Erdogan of Turkey. These are the leaders that they respect, the ones that rule with an iron fist. And I think there's more than a few grains of truth in it. I think that's what it is. I think that's what they respect. You know, not... I mean, you need a leader to be able to lay down the law. You can't have leadership by committee. But at the same time, there's a difference between a leader doing so after they've sort of explained the rationale of how what they're doing is for, like, the good of everyone, and someone who's just saying this is the way it is. If you don't like it, out the airlock. If there are rumours of a cabinet reshuffle on Wednesday, that might imply another 4 days of Braverman really pulling out the stops. Well, maybe or maybe not. As long as if she wants to be sacked, as long as she's satisfied she's going to be sacked, she'll be happy enough. She won't feel the need to throw any more political Molotov cocktails out there. But there we go. Sunak's job was to stop a January 6th style event. I mean, that was Braverman's job, really. I mean... So, Sunak, yeah. The thing that baffles me, though, it's the stupid evil that gets me every time. Sunak, it's not that Sunak is trapped. There's lots of people who will be thinking, you know, oh, but the various factions in the party make it impossible to lead. And it's like, no, it just makes it difficult, but it's not impossible. And because the Tories respect, because they respect leaders who rule with an iron fist, that's what he needed to do. Whether morally right or wrong is another matter. Whether it's morally right or wrong to say, if you write a letter of resignation that I don't like, I'll remove the whip. I mean, that's not really something to support. But it would work in the Tory party. It would work. He could do that and it would actually work. But there we go. David Cameron loved the coalition, allowed it to implement austerity whilst not having to cave to the far right. Yeah, oh yeah. He was, by all accounts, I mean, this is speculation, but you know, it was suggested that he was hoping for another hung parliament in 2015. That way he wouldn't have had to go through with the Brexit referendum, and he'd have still been able to carry on doing what he wanted to do, which was to fleece the country. Would PR be better for long-term decisions such as HS2 or a hindrance? I think better, because to begin with, because our political mindset's wrong in this country, to begin with, coalitions may not be that stable, but eventually they'd stabilise. I'll give you an example. Like Theresa May, when she lost her majority, and she was trying to get a Brexit withdrawal deal through Parliament, what did she keep doing? She kept saying to Jeremy Corbyn, why don't you pass my deal? Like, I don't know why he never just said to her, why don't you look at the people behind you? You've got the numbers, lass. You've got the numbers. Why don't you get the deal passed? He never did. But anyway, she kept going on at him. Well, you should vote for my deal. And it's like, why? You've got a minority government. Why aren't you? What Jeremy Corbyn did actually say is, why don't you negotiate with us to find a deal we can both agree on? Because that's what you have to do if you don't have your own majority. So as soon as politicians cotton on to how PR works, which is consensus politics, cross-party consensus, that's how it works, you'll actually become more stable. The coalitions will become more stable. I mean, the actual coalition themselves may change, like a small party may do badly in elections and out it goes and another one comes in and blah, 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 blah. But the bulk of the coalition remains stable, and they'll build on what they've been doing. So they'll know that they can afford to make long-term decisions. I'm not saying it's like we'll suddenly get all the right long-term decisions being made, but they'll be much safer. You know, if you think about the difference with, let's take the Labour Party, for example. So the Labour Party knows it has to fight for every seat to win power, to be able to form a government, right? But ironically, so if you had PR, Labour would have to form a coalition. It couldn't possibly rule on its own. So you'd think, well, that's not ideal for Labour. But it would be able to, at the moment, Labour can look at maybe being in government for 10 to 15 years. Trying to think beyond that is just pure arrogance. 10 to 15 years is what they'll have. But if they introduce PR, they can reasonably say we could be in power for 30 years. Different coalitions, they'll need different coalitions. And, you know, and over those 30 years, their size within that coalition may wane a bit, but they will be part of that, and they'll probably be the major party of that coalition, so they will get to have the Prime Minister selected. Because the Tories could be deeply unpopular for 20 to 30 years easily. David Cameron's Conservatives were not popular. That's why he couldn't win an outright majority. You know, there'd just been a banking crisis, which they were managing to successfully blame on Labour somehow. The Labour campaign was not great. Gordon Brown, you know, although I have a lot of respect for him as a Prime Minister, was not a good campaigner. So it's like, and yet David Cameron couldn't actually win a majority against all that. Against all of that, couldn't win a majority. Because he wasn't that popular. And if PR had existed in 2010, again, it's no good looking at the numbers of people who voted for different groups at the time, because they would have voted differently. But you could have found it quite difficult to imagine a Tory party forming a coalition. Labour would have been more likely, but also austerity would have surely been impossible. Because what would have happened is, like, the Lib Dems sort of went along. I mean, they were still foolish to go along with it, I would say. But they knew they had no other stable coalition in the offing. Whereas with PR, you've got choices. So you could have a situation where you go, okay, we'll work with you, Conservatives. And then the Conservatives start, you know, bossing you around and forcing you to implement policies that are really no good for you. But with PR, it's like, well, we'll just form a coalition with Labour instead then. And the Greens, Labour and the Greens, say. You say one thing that Corbyn excelled at was engaging the youth in politics. He didn't, though. People say that because when you did a survey, he was popular with young people, which is true. But he didn't. Because if you look at 2019, votes by age, I'm going to try and find it quickly now, I may not be able to. He didn't actually get them to turn out to vote. So he didn't. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. Did they turn out to vote for him? No, they didn't. Let's see how quickly I can find it. I've got a link somewhere. Let me see if I can find it in an image, because I know the image I'm looking for. Oh, here it is. I found it really quickly. Let me... hold on. I'll pull it up on the screen. Okay. So, right, hang on. Stick it down there. So these are different age groups. And it actually shows you 2015, 2017, 2019, right? So you have got an increase in the number of young people voting, which was good. But it was still a really small number. That's the problem. Whereas you look at, and this is the problem we have in British politics. You know, this is why there's always the focus on the old people, because they're the ones who vote. Like, even in 2019, there's a bit over 50%, which is better than in 2015. But then look at, like, you know, the 55 to 64 group, over 70%. And that was a significant reduction. You know, 65 to 74 year group, you know, nearer 75, 76%. And that was a reduction. You know, there were fewer of the older people voting than in 2017, but it's still way more than those young people. And that's the thing. You know, you've got to... It's like it's a bit like when you look at a survey on a single issue, and it's like, oh, you know, 65% of people are in favour of this, and it's like, yeah, but will they vote for it? Because it's like, if you ask them on the street in a survey, which of these two positions do you adopt? People will happily say. Some people say don't know, to be fair, but some people say, oh yeah, I agree with this, or I agree with this. But it's like then, okay, so when you've got a chance to vote for it, do they vote for it? Well, a lot of people don't vote for it. So I'm trying to... Actually, let's just get rid of that. I'll go keep that one up because that's it's a really interesting one to look at, and it highlights the problem. Like I keep saying to young people, if they would only vote in the numbers we can see on the top right here, the older groups, you just like I used to say to my students, like the older students, the ones who were of voting age, I said, I get that none of the candidates may appeal to you and you don't want to vote for any of them, but you don't have to vote. You don't have to vote for a candidate because it escapes. People think if you go and vote that you have to vote for someone. It's like, no, you don't. You don't. You go, you get your ballot paper and you just draw a grumpy face somewhere well away from the candidates. Don't indicate any of them. Just put your mark somewhere. Don't write anything rude, but put a grumpy face underneath the names of all the candidates. Fold it up, put it in the box. You've counted as voting. You've been ticked off. So when the politicians get all this data, they will see, instead of like just 50% of young people voting, they will see 80% of people voting, and they will go, oh, young people's votes are up for grabs. And you just watch them. You just watch them start to include policies for young. I mean, various parties, Labour certainly do have policies for young people, not the least of which is Captain Barks Roberts just said, giving 16-year-olds the vote, 16 and 17-year-olds the vote. But you watch them start to shout it. Because what the problem is, like, parties actually have a lot of policies. And they may have policies that appeal to you and you just don't know about them. Because if you get all your information from the mainstream media rather than... And I will be honest, Labour are really bad. Because if you go to the Labour Party website, can you find their policies? No. I had someone in the comments the other day saying, oh, it's all right bashing the Tories, but what are Labour going to do to get our economy firing up? And I posted the link to Labour's industrial strategy. It's like, oh. But, the average person on the street wouldn't know that, would they? Like, you can't even go to the Labour Party website and easily find it. If I go to the Labour Party website, I can't find a big thing with flashing lights around it saying, these are our policies. Do you want to have a read of them? You've actually got to find it with Google. So you will find them. They're out there. They just don't make it easy. So the only policies that people are aware of are the ones they're funneling through the mainstream media outlets. And they can only afford a little bit of bandwidth there. They can only focus on 5 policies probably. 5 things is usually the accepted wisdom. In reality, you might be able to get away with 6. But about 5 policies is all you can focus on. So which ones you focus on depends on who are your target voters. Young people need to make themselves swing voters. And you do that by voting. But it's a vicious circle, isn't it? Circle or cycle, I don't know. It's the same thing. It's like young people will say quite reasonably, well, what are politicians doing to get my vote? And politicians are going, well, what are young people doing to attract us? It's like young people are going, what are politicians doing to win our vote? Politicians are saying, what are young people doing to win our policies? It's like... If youth concern was as powerful as age concern, politicians would pay a lot of attention. Yes. But ultimately, that is the power of your vote. It's not an individual vote, sure, generally doesn't matter, although there can be contests that are so tight it comes down to... In fact, there was an election this week, wasn't there, where there had to be a tiebreaker. There was a council by-election where it was won by the drawing of lots because it was between... I can't remember if there's a Conservative and Independent candidate or an Independent and Labour candidate. But there was a council by-election this week that was a dead heat. So it was won by drawing lots. That's what happens. You can do it by tossing a coin or whatever, but it was randomised. So one vote can come down to it, but mostly one vote doesn't. But large numbers of votes. 16-year-olds will look at my shorts. No, that sounds wrong. It would sound wrong, yes. Yeah, I don't think I'm really... I'll try my best with the shorts. I'm never going to really get through to lots and lots of young voters. I wish I could. I'm not really, I'm an old white fella. I'm not really the person to appeal to the young, but it is what it is. It says Keir shut the Young Labour organisation down. It didn't really. I mean, what we're talking about was it shutting down an organisation. Let me get rid of this now. That was trying to present policies like, the student protest politics stuff, but that's actually really damaging for the party. What Labour need is an actual youth movement. Oh, that's a good idea, Craig. Says you almost need a search function on the website. I'm a male professional, 34 to 50, South East England, home hunting. Here is a selection of Labour policy that might appeal to you. That's actually a really good idea. I'm going to make a note of that. That's a stunning idea. I'd never thought of that. If ever I get to talk to Labour, I'm going to suggest that. That is the best comment I've ever seen on this channel. It's like, that would be good, wouldn't it? Hang on, let me just, there we go. I have clipped it for posterity. Posterity, rather. Right, hang on. Now I've got bloody things everywhere. Hold on. Something's going wrong. There we go. Right, my cursor was playing about. Are there any rules on someone buying up advertising space to bash Tories but not support an alternative party, i.e. not on Labour's budget? And what if they did actively support a party but not paid by? Yeah, there are obviously lots of really weird rules when it comes to political campaigning. You do have to be careful not to align yourself with any group if you want to do it yourself, particularly in the year leading up to election. So we have to assume at the moment we're in the year leading up to a general election. So you do have to be a little bit careful. If you're your own organisation and you want to spend on advertising, presenting a political view, and it can be attacking a Conservative policy or something like that. Yeah, as long as you're not aligning yourself with any other group, not just party, but group, then yes, you can be your own thing. But you do have to be a little bit careful. You're not aligning yourself so that you're not seen as a splinter group, because there are serious legal consequences for messing that up. What I would generally say is don't actually actively, particularly when you think you might be in the 12 months before an election, don't get involved in political advertisements yourself unless you know what you're doing. Much better to donate to groups you approve of, which don't have to be political parties. I'll encourage both my sons to vote. I must say, do you want maths till 18? Well, actually, unfortunately, that might encourage them to vote Conservative, because whatever they say they'll do, they never do in terms of anything that's remotely like a public policy. How much closer do all these shenanigans get us to a general election? Instability in the Tory party inevitably moves it more quickly. I mean, if they stabilise, then of course they can. See, I don't even know when they want to go for an election. I think they're better off doing it in May. There are some Labour MPs who've commented on the fact that the King's speech doesn't have much meat to it. So it's like, well, if they don't have the election in May, they're going to be scratching around for something to do in Parliament in September. That doesn't prove anything, but it's an indication. But, I think it's fair to say either they want the election in May or they want it in October. And October the 31st would, for them, probably be a reasonable date to go for if they were mad enough to go for autumn. So you're probably talking May the 2nd or October the 31st as the two most likely dates. That is if the Conservatives can be stable enough to essentially decide for themselves. But I'm not sure at all. But yeah, any sort of instability of the party like this inevitably makes them think in terms of sooner rather than later, I think. There is a, because there is a counter view to that, which is that the more chaotic they look, the more the public will be shaking their heads. And so do you really want to go to the polls when you're looking unstable? But then I would say for that is, the point is that when you're unstable, you risk fracturing completely. So if you avoid going to the polls in, say, May, because things are your party's like creaking at the joints, all that you risk happening is in September, it just going, particularly as you get up to conference season, it blowing up completely. Other benefit of that sort of search thing is it means you could potentially build a mailing list to keep people informed of the policies they may be interested in before and after the election. Yes, absolutely, certainly. Yeah, there's so much they could do, Labour, in terms of communication. That's a good point as well. If anyone would actually want to sign up to a mailing list for a political party, they may not, but yes, you could certainly do that. Decriminalise or legalise cannabis, you get plenty of young voters turning out. I'm not sure that. I mean, it's a policy that will appeal more to young people. I'm not sure that there's like every young people just that will just do it. I think you may be overstating the political benefits there. Again, it's what will actually get people to turn out and vote. We can tell from polling that a lot of young people would go, well, yeah, decriminalise it. But it doesn't mean that they would turn out to vote for that. It just means if you ask them on the street, they're there anyway. There's no effort in them just answering the question. They'll answer the question. But there it is. In terms of MPs' behaviour, is this the worst parliament ever? It's the worst parliament in my lifetime, definitely. When we talked about in the mid to late 90s, Tory sleaze, we're really in the mid-90s we were talking, and we talked about Tory sleaze, and everyone, it was all appalling. We had the cash for questions, we had like extramarital affairs and all that sort of stuff. And at the time, it was all like, it was like the last days of Sodom and Gomorrah. And then you look at now and you think, well, there's no comparison. Absolutely no comparison. So, yeah, I cannot think of any parliament in my lifetime. I'm not a historian. You could argue there was a parliament that actually literally triggered a civil war. So they haven't done that yet, although Braverman's given it her best shot. But there we go. Just say I've been looking forward to the join button coming to mobile for a while. Glad to finally be able to contribute to the continued survival. Well, thank you very much. LSE seem to think that neoliberalism exists, and they talk about it quite a lot. Don't tell Phil. No, I'm not saying neoliberalism doesn't exist. What I'm saying is that almost everyone that uses the term uses it incorrectly. They basically just use it for anything that isn't. It's like there's some people who just think there's Marxism and then there's neoliberalism, and that's it. Those are the only two economic ideas. Whereas there's lots of people who don't actually realise what it is. So that's my issue with it, people using it incorrectly. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's not as widespread as people think. You think young people today are generally less bothered about cannabis than we were? Unfortunately, what they're bothered about, ultimately, when you talk about 18 to 24-year-olds, is being able to have a decent job and being able to get themselves a home, whether it be rented or a mortgage, whatever. That's what they want. They want to be able to afford an independent lifestyle. They don't want to be stuck living with their parents. They want to be, they're adults. They, when they're working, once they're in full-time work, and they want a decent job with like prospects of getting, so that when they're 40, this is the problem. You've got 40-year-olds today who have a lower standard of living than when they were 25. That's mad. So what young people want is they want a job where year on year their standard of living will increase. So their hard work is rewarded, right? That's what making work pay is. And they want, if they're in full-time work, they want to get their own place. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can be a flat, a studio flat, whatever. But they want their own place. They want to be able to say, I'm working full-time. I'm contributing to the economy. I'm an adult. I should be able to live like an independent adult. That's what young people want. But even offering that doesn't necessarily mean they'll turn out and vote, because young people are also quite cynical. I never outgrew my cynicism, I'm afraid. In fact, actually, I think it's increased. And young people don't necessarily trust politicians to deliver it. And again, I don't blame them. All right, last one here, because we've run out of time. It says, if Braverman does become Tory leader, how long will she last and how irreparable will the damage should be? So there's lots of circumstances we can't possibly predict. Ultimately, as long as Labour look like they're delivering, Braverman will be like Ian Duncan Smith. She'll last about 2 years. I think she'll blow up quite quickly. She can't blow up as quickly as she would in government because she'll be in opposition. But, you know, I don't think she's going to rescue them. But they will give her time. They'll give her more time in opposition, right? Because they'll be in disarray. So if she does become leader, I think 2 to 3. I can't see her lasting a full parliament. Really, I'm afraid. But there we go. We'll have to call it there. Thank you very much for coming on, everyone. Have a very good evening. And until next time, I'll see you later.